All right, thank you for that introduction. So, as mentioned, today I'm going to be talking to you about our short course program at the University of Western Australia that's run by the Centre for Applied Statistics. So just a little bit of information about the University of Western Australia. It's in Perth, which is our state capital. The most relevant information here for today's presentation is that the university has approximately 4,000 higher degree research students. These are primarily PhD students, but also include master's students who have a research component or purely research masters. We also have about 1,400 academic staff and about 1,100 general staff in terms of full-time equivalent. So participants in our course draw from those two cohorts, as well as people in industry, and also there are a number of other universities in Perth, and participants in our courses may come from those as well. Our Centre for Applied Statistics has been in operation for over 30 years. I myself started in October 2016, and we have three main roles. So the main focus today is to talk about our short course program, but if you're interested in how we provide support to our postgraduate students and our consultancy operations, I'd be happy to chat to any of you afterwards. So at the end of last year, we sat down as a team. We knew that one of our part-time staff, who was an SPSS expert and had been teaching a number of short courses, was about to leave us, and we wanted to redesign our short course program. So this is diagrammatically a flow that we imagine could be used for our program. It's going to take us a number of years to implement that. So I'll give you an idea of the structure and some more specifics on courses that are already developed and have already run. So our idea is that students who were very new to working with data could start with something pre-statistics like data visualization. Students could then follow one of two pathways. Either they may already know statistics, first year course at some university or something similar, or have worked with other statistical programs but are looking to transition into R. They could follow the top program, and I'll be speaking most extensively about those two courses, Introduction to R and Statistics in R. Alternatively, students may not have any background in statistics, or it's been a long time since they studied statistics, and they would transition through the bottom stream, which would be Introductory Statistics with applications in R, which I will briefly introduce. From here, we've been asking participants informally as they complete our courses over the last couple of years, what would you like to see as a next step in your R journey? And we've had, I guess, two themes to the responses that we've received. And the first theme is that people are interested in more sophisticated tools and techniques and information about statistical methodologies. So we've had a number of ideas of courses that we could run in this area. The second response we get is from participants who are less interested in using R in a statistics-based framework and more interested in understanding at a greater level the ability to use R more efficiently and so forth. So courses like writing functions in R could also be part of future iterations of our short course program. So today I want to focus in on the courses in black: data visualization, Introduction to R, Statistics in R, and Introductory Statistics with applications in R, because these have been developed and we have already run these courses this year. And I will briefly highlight two more courses which we are developing this calendar year. Before I cover the courses in detail, I would highlight the sorts of participants we get. They do draw from the cohorts that I mentioned at the start. So in the pink we have, and that's always the first column, the number of HDR students. So primarily these would be PhD students. And it's good for us that this year these students have dominated our courses. We receive funding from our graduate research school, who these students are enrolled with, to provide the courses. Traditionally, in previous years, the course structure was slightly different, but we were getting a much higher proportion of industry participants, which are in the blue. We also receive in our courses both general and academic staff. So we teach to a very broad range of participants. And some people think that is quite a challenge, but as you'll notice as I discuss the content, these are very introductory level concepts, and we generally are able to find that students from a broad range of backgrounds are able to connect with the material. So the data visualization course I won't cover in a lot of detail, primarily because there is no R in the course. But the aim of the course is really pre-statistic. So it's aimed at people who are starting their data journey to get them on a good footing, to understand what some of the good principles of data visualization are, presenting single variables to more variables, bringing in some principles around how graphics can be misleading, and a bid to encourage them to not use those sorts of misleading visualizations, and also talk about the efficiencies around tough data ink ratio, things like that, the impact of color and visualizations to give them a good footing. So I want to spend the most time talking about our introduction to R course. So in prior years, we had a 2-day course we called R Basics. And this was aimed at a cohort who didn't yet know R, but already knew statistics, possibly were using other software packages. And what we found in our experience with that course is that people had no problems, by and large, with the first component, the importing of data, cleaning of data, and so forth. And then you would get to the statistics module, and you'd say, okay, if you want to do a t-test, use t.test, da-da-da-da-da. And they would say, what's a t-test? And so we were really getting quite a mixed cohort. And so we have split that 2-day course into these 2 one-day courses that have very distinct outcomes. So our Introduction to R course is about giving people an experience of writing their own code. Most people come to us having downloaded R and RStudio the day or 2 prior to the course and with no coding background. So we want them across this 1 day to learn the principles of importing data, manipulating and cleaning data, and introduce them to visualizations through ggplot. So we have also transitioned from our R Basics course where we used only base R to tidyverse, and I'll cover that in more detail shortly. I say there that we teach R Markdown. It's probably extending the truth slightly. I do a demonstration, and I usually only devote maybe 10-15 minutes, but I do think it's important that people at the start of their R journey, who are either academically orientated and looking for reproducible research outcomes, or industry-based and looking for things like automated reporting, that they get a flavour for what is possible with the tools that are in R already. So this is a 1-day course, and we have also run it as an evening course across 4 evenings. So some of the things that work well, we have transitioned students to using RStudio and instructors using RStudio as well. Syntax highlighting is a great feature, I'm sure you're all aware. What I found as a facilitator is that it's helpful for us to see where students are going wrong and debug their code quite quickly. Remember, the majority of participants here don't code. They may have used an interface like a SPSS framework to pick from a drop-down menu analyses that they want. And so debugging their code is a really important part of us as facilitators helping them with their R journey. I also think it's useful for students that they can see everything. So they can see the code, they can see the console, they can see plots, they can see help functions in one interface. One thing that is important with courses like these that are, relatively speaking, quite short, is that as much time as possible is spent on key learning outcomes. And one thing that is, in my opinion, not a key learning outcome is how to write a file path. And when we've used non-RStudio formats or base R, we've spent far too long trying to get students to set up their file paths and all that kind of stuff correctly. So being able to set the working directory using the session menu and things like that saves a lot of time, and that time can be redirected to the core learning outcomes. So it's been a transition for our team. One of the advantages of when we did run courses that used RStudio but only base R functions is that we didn't have to have participants install packages. And that is a very big advantage because it meant that the majority of students, if not all students, were showing up ready to go first thing in the morning. When it gets to installing packages, we find that a lot of participants have issues with not having administrator rights or having trouble connecting to the internet in the environment we're in. And once again, we do lose a lot of time. So we've been trying to refine our information that we provide students ahead of class, but we still end up with some issues with students installing tidyverse and other packages that we require them to have in order to teach our courses with a tidyverse-based framework. We also had some feedback that, base R graphics were just not of a quality our students wanted, and that was certainly something I agreed with and felt was a strong advantage of moving to the tidyverse-based framework. In terms of a couple more disadvantages that I'll highlight from this slide, the pipe notation is quite unfamiliar to students who haven't got a coding background whatsoever, so trying to explain to them what is going on in that is a bit of a learning curve. So that has been an interesting challenge for our team. And the other interesting challenge I've had is initially when I taught using Gather, the wide to long format transition, I tried to explain it from a syntax perspective, and I really lost a lot of participants. And so I now teach that from a perspective of this is essential, this is a piece of code that achieves that outcome, which you can reference later when you begin your own data journey. So moving on to our second course, which is kind of a complement, we usually run it as a follow-up when we do it in the one-day format. This course is essentially aimed at people who already know basic statistical methodologies such as we list there, chi-squared test, linear regression, and so forth, and they just want to learn how to run them in R. So this might again be among their first introductions to coding. We do expect them to have the equivalent level of R knowledge that we would teach in our introduction to R course. So whether they do our course or learn online, that's totally fine. In terms of the difference of moving from a base R to a tidyverse based approach, I do think the tidyverse makes it easier to teach them how to make custom summaries, which is something that's important to some of our participants. But I am still using a mix of visuals, so I still prefer things like the 4 plots that you get as model diagnostics out of linear regression and so forth. So I wouldn't say, in all honesty, that we've fully transitioned this course to tidyverse and that we are still using some elements of base R and visuals from base R as well. So this course has only run once. So what we did was this course was originally taught in SPSS until the end of last year. We typically would teach it twice in a year. We were experiencing declining numbers in the course, and we were also experiencing the most common question at the end of the course being, so how do I get hold of an SPSS license anyway? And so students who had been taking that version were often coming to us for 5 days of training. That was the 3 days of this introductory statistics course, followed up with 2 days of R basics training. So it was taking them 5 days of training to get to a position which we now think we can get them to in 3 days. So we say with applications in R, and as I note there, the use of R is really secondary to the outcome of learning statistics. So these students have either not studied statistics before or haven't studied statistics for a long time, and so we want to introduce them to basics around research design, comparing means, obviously t-tests, assumptions behind those techniques, and we get as far as simple linear regression and a little bit on proportions and odds and contingency tables and the like. So this course is now in 3 days, giving what a lot of students were coming to us for 5 days of training previously. These 2 courses that I'm about to talk about, we haven't run yet, but they are in development, and we are running them based in Australia. We've just finished our first semester. We're about to go into our second semester. We typically run our courses prior to semesters or in between semesters. So these will run in the November-December break for the first time. So this is really focused in on people who need to go one step further in their statistical journey. So it's going to be talking about things like blocking, logistic regression, and so forth. And again, the format for this will be tidyverse based, but we are really thinking of R as being secondary to the outcome of learning about these methodologies. But all of the interpretation and so forth will be with respect to the R output. We are also broadening our statistical offerings with clustering in R. A lot of people who come through the journey of I'm using R primarily for data manipulation and so forth are also coming to us with requests around, like dimension reduction type problems, clustering kinds of questions. So we're going to address these in this one-day course for the first time. So this, I think, will probably be more likely to be popular with our industry partners than higher degree research students, but I'll be interested to see what mix of students we have at the end of the year. So that's all I wanted to share with you today, but this is a refresher of the program that we're looking at developing over the next few years, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you. I teach R myself, and in 2 days or 3 days, and I see that tidyverse and ggplot and all that is taking more and more place in my course, and that's justified. But at some point, I have to teach what are the basic, what is a vector, what is a matrix, what is a list, what is a data frame. In your course, at what when do you teach that, if you do? Because I think that if I only go for tidyverse and those things, those basic things are untreated. So that's my question, basically.
So just to check I understood you, so you're asking about when we teach lists and so forth, other objects?
Sorry? I didn't.
Were you asking when do we introduce other data types, including lists and so forth? Basically, we generally only introduce, so I guess part of the first module where we talk about importing data, we also do talk about things like case sensitivity, setting up vectors and things like that. And so I guess we're trying to teach it on an as needs to basis. And perhaps the structure we use is a little bit less formal than what you may be using in your own practice.
Okay. Thank you very much. It was very enjoyable, and it's very nice to see that's actually quite similar to some teaching that I've been doing, both in first years, actually, first year courses, full semester courses in Queensland, but also recently developing some 4-day courses. So I'd be very interested to talk to you later. I guess one of my comments is I haven't yet tried teaching the tidyverse as such, but one of the things I found when I was going into my making the workshops, like short workshops for postgraduates, in fact, in applied sciences, and so all of this is relevant, I found over the years that it's probably nice to start using the R projects. I don't know if you've used those, to get them to do that very quickly rather than, because I agree, looking at sessions and those types of where's my data, where's this, but putting things into an R project to start with really helps them to forget about that. And I just wondered about if you tried that.
So we haven't tried the R project approach, so I can't comment on any personal experience. But I think if we were to try it, the place to start would be our Introductory Statistics with Applications in R course, because that course is aimed at teaching statistics, and the use of R is incidental, and we would like them to be able to walk away with some ability to use the methodologies that are being taught with their own data. But because of the R being a secondary outcome, I think if we were to take the R project-based approach, that would be first cab off the rank in that regard.
We have time for one last quick question, please.
Could you clarify a little bit the time spent in lecture versus the time the students are practicing on the computer during those 1 or 3 days course?
Yeah, so the main course I focused on is an introduction to R, so I'll use that as an example. So throughout 3 or 4 sessions, and we typically have 4 hour-and-a-half long sessions, it's a mix of instructor-led demonstration and short examples. And then we have one module which is really around the data manipulation, where they get an unclean data set and they step through a series of about 8 tasks. And those are demonstrated. So not all students make it through all 8 tasks, only the really strong students would make it through all of them. But we make sure to provide them the code and R worked examples and solutions as well. So the mix, I guess, gets close to 50-50. When we go to our statistics in R, it's a lot more, the modules are set up like demonstration, followed by short exercise. So I would say it's probably 60-70% instructor-led.
Okay, thank you. Let's thank the speaker again.